Hi, this is Deidre Cooper-Sipe, and we will be having a discussion about the environment today for my research assignment. To my left is Samuel Johnson.
Hi.
To my left again is Keegan Thompson.
Hey.
And to my left again is Garrett Rudolph.
Hey.
So the main topic of the discussion today is how the environment is in decline and we need to do something about it. But how exactly is the environment in decline and how can we see these features?
So the main issues that are prominent in global climate change today are ocean acidification, rising temperatures, and the increase of ocean temperatures and how that affects the ecosystem as well as humans and just everything involved with that. So I guess the first one would be ocean temperatures. The average temperature has been increasing over the past 100 years, and we're reaching levels of temperature in our water that we've never had before. This is having a huge effect on the very basic structure of our food chain in the ocean. And so, when the bottom pillars of the food chain get taken out from under, then it just has a catastrophic effect on the rest of the food chain in the ocean, and humans as well.
So it would also be polar bears going extinct on the North Pole and the poles melting as well?
Yeah.
Because of the ocean temperature?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to add something about there's been some hard evidence of this happening. I don't know if you guys have seen on the news. ABC News has been covering it. On Long Beach, California, and a few beaches north and south of it, 15 great white sharks were spotted within 100 meters of the ocean, of the shore at Long Beach, and another 16 were spotted north and south, which is 30 great white sharks, within 100 yards of people. Swimming under paddle boarders. Helicopters have had to fly over and warn people to stay out of the water. The sharks are aggressive and they're breaching, and this is behavior that's literally never been seen. And a lot of scientists are speculating this is because their prey is getting pushed to different parts of the ocean due to the changing and acidification, and then the toxic parts of the ocean that are now filled with trash. And so the sharks are following the food, and it's putting humans in danger.
It's a very dangerous development. I would also say that air pollution is a very serious problem that we're dealing with our environment today. The quality of life of our future generations might be at risk because of the crap polluting out in the air. Mm-hmm. It's also raising the temperature, causing probably more natural disasters in the futures with monsoons in tropical areas and hurricanes becoming way more common in the South of America as well, or southern part of the United States of America is what I tried to say.
What a lot of people don't realize is when they think of climate change or global warming, they just think the temperature is going to increase. But what it does is actually creates greater fluctuations in the temperature. So you'll get these really hot periods and you'll get these really cold periods. And so I know in Wisconsin this fall we had 3 polar vortexes where it just brought in this cold air from the Arctic that were reaching temperatures negative 30 degrees without the wind chill. We've never seen that type of temperature before. We set multiple records on coldest days of the year.
Yeah, definitely. That's been very prevalent. I feel like every year we're setting a new record for heat and then a new record for cold. Mm-hmm. I am from Seattle, and this was it was 4 months without any sun or stopping of rain, something crazy like that, and that beat last year's record. And then the summers are drier than ever. I've been comparing living in Seattle to California, and if you were to say that 5 years ago, people would be like, what about all the rain? And now it's kind of well, it doesn't really rain in the summer, and it's a lot of drastic heat changes. And if you go hiking now, you can see that effect on trees. They're getting green later and dying earlier. It's evident. It's happening.
We had pollen counts that were summer counts in February. That doesn't happen because February is a winter month. You're supposed to have snow, but we had the warmest February on record.
That is ridiculous. So, what are proposed solutions we can have to this problem? Or, are there aspects that we as humans can do, the individual can do to change this? And what is the easiest way to get it done, firstly? We'll start with that.
So I think obviously reducing your carbon footprint, being mindful of where you consume products from, make sure to just eat local, from places that treat their animals properly, because healthy cows produce less carbon monoxide than poorly treated cows, I think. But then the biggest thing you can do is just vote for politicians who support pro like renewable energy and like wanting to limit our carbon outputs in the country.
Definitely.
And so that's the single-handedly the biggest thing you can do. Is just voting for politicians who want to help save the environment.
Yeah, I agree with you there on the fact that policy can have a big reduction in waste and at least keep people conscious of doing things. I don't actually know the impacts of the legislation that the world came together to enforce the United States and China to maintain. And I know, unfortunately, those have been redacted under the current administration. But I do know that you brought up cows and eating sustainably. And when I first heard that cows were a big contributor to global warming, I thought that was some sort of like BS answer that was brought up by someone who didn't believe in global warming and they were kind of mocking the idea. Until I did research and looked at how unsustainable beef is. Compared to any other resource that humans harvest, beef is hundreds of times more inefficient. If you were to look at it from a statistical cost, any reasonable consumer in society would never touch beef again if they saw how much water and energy and land they take up. Not only do cattle take up so much resources from feeding them with water, but they ruin land that they're on. Mm-hmm. A lot of people argue that they're actually good because of their manure, but the food that they're being fed is frequently GMO corn because it's cheap and grows really fast and it's like one of the few things that can actually grow near cattle farms because the methane is so much and so strong.
Can I interject something?
Yeah, of course.
So going off of that, that's why I know grass-fed beef isn't nearly as good as like chicken, but it is a better option than like, the traditional corn-fed beef because they are grass-fed and they're pasture-raised. So the farmers are very mindful of like circulating the cows, making sure their land is still intact and healthy.
Yeah, and that actually there's like a natural cycle of reproduction of oxygen and CO2 as opposed to cows locked in cages producing methane. I saw a statistic of if you could either like take a 20-minute shower or eat a hamburger.
Wow. So
much there literally isn't anything more efficient than like one burger patty to the amount of water that goes into it. Wow. And it's pretty frightening. There's a relatively over-dramatic documentary on Netflix called Cowspiracy, which blows some things out of proportions, but does highlight just how disgusting eating beef can be. And I think that people can make a really big difference by staying educated, voting for politicians, and choosing sustainable food. So that's definitely like the number one thing, one of the biggest things that is produced around the world.
When it comes to something that we can do on a campus, when we made our Green Living presentation and paper on it, we based a lot of it, or parts of it, what I meant to say, on water usage. How is using less water helping our environment?
Well, if we take like California, for example, they just got out of like the biggest drought and a water crisis. And so although it's not directly related because we're over here in Illinois and they're over in California, but we're starting to see places where water is becoming much more scarce. And so it's not going to affect us quite as much right now, but in 5, 10, 15 years when we reach these water shortages, because we are eventually going to run out of water, it'll help us then. And I think that's the big thing.
Is it true that using less hot water in showers or showering for less also saves energy?
Yeah, because it doesn't take as much heat. You don't have to heat the water.
And honestly, most of it is what people need to start to think of is like the long run, you know, because people think that, oh, I'm living it, I'm in the now. It's I won't be affected, but I mean, come on, in the long run, all these shortages, all these problems are gonna build up, and it's gonna be even worse. You know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you bring up, Sam. There's a website tool. It's called How Many of Me, and what you do is you enter in how much water you use, how much electricity you think you use, how much food you eat on an average day, and then it says, what if all the other
based it on your location too.
Yeah, all other, is it 3 billion people on the planet? All 3 billion other people use the same amount of resources as you did in one day.
Right.
And it explains how long the Earth could last and if that's even sustainable.
And how many Earths it would take to sustain that lifestyle.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, how many Earths it
wow.
takes. Yeah, that's right. And it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because most people's lifestyles here in first world countries would ruin the world if everyone did it.
I think I'm a very sustainable person. Like I'm very mindful, and it said I needed like 3 Earths or something like that to maintain everything, and that's just because I'm in the U.S. Like if I had that same lifestyle in like Africa, I think it was fine.
Yeah,
it's just based on
way
being in
less
the
than
US.
1 Earth.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually just found this study by the UN. They predict that within 15 years, the world's water supply would fall short by at least 40%.
Oh my God.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. It's irresponsible if you live in places of dryness like California or other desert
What, like 23?
affected areas. That is actually irresponsible to use this water because people in the future might actually die of lack of water because it's the most valuable human resource we can have is just staying hydrated to some sense. We can't go without water for very long.
I think it was. Go on.
And like you were saying something about on campus, so since we were in Green Living, we presented on, tips to going green and water. Tips to going green and just ways to like preserve water. And one of the things we mentioned in our presentation was not letting the shower turn hot while you're waiting. Just hop in, hop out, stuff like that. Just like little tips like that benefits, even though it's so small, so insignificant, but it's so significant in the long run, and I feel like more people need to be aware of that. Like, I mean, obviously not everyone's gonna be all, yeah, let's go save the world, but like if we can get them to contribute just to little things and like add it on, I think that would, benefit us in the long run.
I think there's a stat that if you take like 1 minute off your shower every day, you save like 3,000 gallons of water a year.
Right.
It's like, sure, it's only 3,000 gallons of water, but it's 3,000 gallons of water that you're saving.
Mm-hmm.
So
Definitely. When it comes to going green in the sense of using more public transportation or alternative forms of transportation, so instead of driving a car, ride a bike, take the bus, use your longboard if you have access to that. How important is it really to start investing in sustainable transportation now and reducing our carbon footprint by moving away from, at least I've seen some cars in this area be incredibly large to the point where I find it grotesque, and the wheels don't need to be that high off the ground and everything, with pickup trucks being ridiculous. Why can't more people see the value in driving a hybrid Prius or an electric car or a Tesla model if you can afford that?
That's really good.
that's a really tough question.
Yeah.
I think to actually, so I know you are from Europe and
Mhm.
Norway. Cars in Europe are just way smaller
Oh, definitely.
across the board, like half the size of cars. If you were to get a Suburban and go and drive it in Paris, people would think they're under a terrorist attack. It's just so out of the ordinary. And I think that's huge, and I think that it's just a mindset people
Yeah.
have to adopt. It's got to be
Mhm.
demanded, and it will be made.
Yeah,
And
because
I think that's slowly catching up. I mean, Teslas are very cool and are starting to be demanded. Priuses are kind of have a weird connotation, like you drive it if you're a grandma. I think, it's the mindset that's got to change. That's what I would say. What would you say, Keith?
Yeah, I was gonna go off that. It's really a tough question. So the first thing you said was like how important public forms of transportation are and alternative forms are, and I think that's really important because it's just again minimizing our reliance on these fossil fuels, which are so detrimental to our environment.
definitely.
And I think it's not gonna be like, all right, one day we all just stop driving cars. It's gonna have to be slowly, and I think in working on ways to minimize traffic and just petroleum-based cars. So I know like there's been a lot of research on like hydrogen fuel cells, like electric cars are coming a long way. The Teslas are now getting like 300 miles to the charge, and so now you can theoretically make a trip from like Chicago to like New York or something, or like halfway across the country or something like that. But we're not going to get to a point yet where people go, all right, I can drive from LA to New York with my electric car, just because the batteries don't charge that quickly yet, and we're not at that battery technology yet. But I think if we keep working and keep making positive steps in the right direction, eventually we'll reach a point where people choose those cars over petroleum-based cars.
Yeah.
And not to sound like to dumb down America, but for us, I feel like we're so fixated on the bigger, the better.
Yeah, definitely.
You
It's
know,
that mindset.
the mindset. So like, I feel like if we can just start,
Yeah, that
making
goes
it
for
simpler, right?
that goes for even houses. Like, why do houses need to be this big? We're using more energy to keep them warm in the winter, and more energy on keeping the big ass house cold in the summer. If the house was smaller, we would actually save energy on the temperature in the house itself.
That's a
So
great
we have
point.
we have to like minimize the way we live in everything. So cars don't need to be as big, planes don't need to be as big, houses don't need to be as big. But we have to make a conscious choice of that and know that it's the right thing and not just go for our desire.
Yeah, and it's really hard too for Americans as well because like we're so far apart. It's not like Europe where like everything is like a train station away or walking distance away. Like you have to drive literally everywhere to get to point A to point B.
There's ways around it, but like
Yeah.
people choose like the cars because it feels easier,
Right.
even though it may not be that much easier.
Definitely. And lastly, a point I would like to go in on is recycling and wasting properly. Like, how important is it to know what can be reusable so we can use it in the future so we're not wasting material and energy producing this? If it's going to go to waste somewhere in the ocean, it's just going to lie there. And when it also comes to that's how we can reusable energy through compost. As I know in Europe and in the States, there's programs that are looking into the possibility of using compost to fuel transportation in the future. So we should be looking more into that. But how does our recycling and something that we can do help that? Knowing your
So,
metals from your
Let's
plastic.
take like just a plastic bag for example. You go to the grocery store, you get your groceries in a plastic bag, and you throw the bag out. That bag could either end up in a landfill or make its way into a stream. Once it's in the stream, it could make its way to an ocean or any sort of freshwater area. And when it's there, fish don't know the difference between a little piece of plastic or a thing of food. So they're going to eat the plastic and then choke. And then they will die. And so that if you have multiple thousands of millions of plastic bags making its way to the ocean, and fish are constantly eating these plastic bags and dying, it's just horrible. You're killing animals by your just lack of knowledge on not to get the plastic bag or paper bag.
Plus, then they sit. If they do get to a landfill,
It sits for like millions
it's
of years.
gonna outlive you and your generation's lifetime.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I think recycling's huge and easy, and a lot of people don't. And it's also easy to do compost and like do other things.
It
I
goes
think
back to
people
that,
don't
like,
do it
mindset
because it's
and
hard.
awareness.
But if you have a recycle and a trash right there, it's like almost one full extra step. Even less, it's so easy just to throw the wrapper into the trash and then like the cardboard into the recycle for whatever you just bought, you know, like, and that goes a long way.
Little things like that.
I really like the system I have in my own country where the Norwegian government has taken a step to actually make compost a part of the national trash system.
Yeah.
So, for example, we have a system that can identify different colors. So the green bag is compost, blue bag is plastic, and then the white bag is like all sort of trash that you might have that you need to get rid of. But what it does is it scans the color of the bag and then makes the bag go into its right area. So you can compost from your house but still throw your garbage into the same trash can as you always have.
I know Scandinavia and just Europe in general, they're so far ahead of the U.S. in terms of like different recycling techniques and composting.
Mhm.
I know like Seattle, and where I'm from, Madison, we're pretty ahead of like all the other states and like towns, but there's in cities, but there's still a lot of work to be had in the U.S. to catch up.
And Scandinavia is not a big area compared to what the States is. It's easy to change a smaller area with a small population than it is to change one of the largest countries on Earth with the third, fourth biggest population in the world as well. Like, it needs to be a drastic change, but it's also going to be so much more difficult to make happen.
Yeah, but honestly, I'll be completely honest. I think it's all about, educating people. I learned about, recycling and compost. Honestly, when I came here, I recycled, but like, I thought basically everything would be recyclable, but there's like so much to it. And if you just like do the simple things, putting the right things in the right area, compost and recycling, it saves so much. It's like, it's incredible. Just doing the right thing. It's just like the cost is so much less. It's just, I don't know, but I just feel like making people aware and educating them on what is acceptable to be recycled and what's to be compost is good.
I agree. And then to end it on a note is, to see the change that we want to see, we also have to start voting for politicians that are pushing green initiatives, as Keegan mentioned earlier. That's the only really true way we can show our intentions of changing the world for a better place. Any final comments from any of you?
No, thanks, Dietrich.
Thank you, Dietrich.
Thank you.
All right. Hope you enjoyed this podcast.